Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Year's Best Fantasy Volume 1, edited by Paula Guran, narrated by Dina Pearlman and Perry Daniels. Introduction. Mirrors. Paula Guran. Fantasy, and all fiction is fantasy of one kind or another, is a mirror, a distorting mirror to be sure, and a concealing mirror, set at 45 degrees to reality. But it's a mirror nonetheless, which we can use to tell ourselves things we might not otherwise see. Neil Gaiman, an introduction, Smoke and Mirrors, Short Fictions and Illusions. Welcome to the inaugural volume of a new series, The Year's Best Fantasy. Whether this anthology provides any insight into the state of short fantasy as published in the English language in 2021 is debatable. I really don't intend it to be such. My aim is simply to provide the listener with an anthology of good fantasy stories, all of which were published in the previous calendar year. If I have a definition of fantasy, and I can't say that I do, it is quite broad, but I think you will find all these stories fall into that category. Obviously, not all the best fantasy from 2021 is included here. There's a lot of great fantasy being written these days. Some of its authors seldom, if ever, write in the short form. Some wonderfully talented authors simply write much better novels than they do short stories. There are also fabulous fantasy novellas being published, but the length thereof precludes inclusion here. Even limiting our best to short works doesn't mean these 23 works are all of the best of that length that appeared in 2021. Decisions had to be made. I hope I made good ones. Nor can I or anyone find and read every single fantasy story published. I'm sure I missed some that should have been included. As I've pointed out before in other introductions to other books, anthologies with titles including phrases like Year's Best, Best of, Best, fill in the blank, are what they are. When compiling such a volume, I do not feel any editor can completely and absolutely fulfill the inference of the title. Fiction is not a race to be won. There are no absolutes with which to measure it. Every person who edits a best anthology exerts tremendous effort in a genuine attempt to offer a book worthy of its grandiose moniker. Choices are made with sincere intention, but personal taste is involved and, like it or not, compromises must be made. We all hope you, the readers, find satisfaction in our selections. I sought out stories in magazines, both print and digital, single-author collections, and anthologies. I encourage you to read publications like these regularly. Of course, not every venue worth reading wound up with a story or story selected. If you know me at all, it may well be as the editor of the year's best dark fantasy and horror series that's been published annually since 2010. Its 12th volume, even though it is titled The Year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror, Volume 3, covering, as this book does, the calendar year of 2021, will be published by Pyre in November. So it's fair for anyone to wonder where I might think fantasy ends and dark fantasy begins, or vice versa. There are certainly stories in this anthology that could fit into its darker companion, and any of those darker fantasies are still fantasy and could have a place herein. In general, however, I saved the darkest stories for the year's best dark fantasy and horror. Even if you are a regular and voracious reader of fantasy, my guess is that at least a few of the 24 authors included here will be new to you. Make note of their names. I think they are all worth looking for now and in the coming years. The 23 stories selected for this volume are, just like fantasy itself, not only diverse, but diverse in many ways. I don't think any can be called epic. Limited length alone partially negates that type of fantasy, but some at least have that flavor. There are fairy tales and fables and myth-based stories, stories set in worlds quite like our own, others in worlds quite unlike this one. Not that the stories are confined to traditional fantasy. Anything can happen in fantasy, and just about anything happens in these stories. What they have in common is that they take the reader from the ordinary into the extraordinary, and they make the impossible seem quite possible. The authors have found inspiration in several Asian and African cultures, as well as variations on Western tradition. There are different styles of writing. Some tales are light-hearted, others more serious in tone. The longest is almost 17,000 words in length. The shortest is less than 1,000. One final note. This is my 50th anthology, all but one of which has been published in the last 16 years. It has been a privilege and an honor to edit them and other books. Last year, for the first time since 1999, I took a full-time job outside of publishing. Not only is the job unrelated to publishing, the work is performed in an office outside my home, also something I haven't done in a couple of decades. I thought at first I would start to be able to eventually give up editing and such. To the contrary, in the past 8 months, despite the challenges, I've realized more than ever how much I enjoy doing this. I hope I will be able to keep doing it. National Hot Tea Day 2022. Paula Guran. Unseelie Brothers Limited. Fran Wilde. The Contract. A week before the season began, as Mrs. Vanessa Saunders held brunch court at the Empire Hotel, a photo appeared on her phone. A large oak door beneath a pale green sign with silver lettering. Impossible, she thought, flipping the infernal device over, before Mrs. Lillian Talbot and Mrs. Caroline Rankinfall, her fête noire, charity ball co-chairs, could glimpse it. But then their screens lit up too. "The atelier," Lillian murmured. "Impossible." She shifted in her seat, aware the others were watching her. "I just need to run to the ladies' room." Her chair screeched backwards until Vanessa locked the other woman in her gaze and held her there. "Unseelie Brothers," Caroline said, oblivious to the battle of wills. "My mother used to talk about their gowns. Don't you have one, Vanessa? I remember the Post called it—" Vanessa Saunders' eyelid twitched. "The gown of flowers. Wouldn't part with it for the world." She signaled the waiter. "Too bad they're too late for the season. Only a fool would try to cancel a Dior or Balenciaga order now, especially on a Saturday. My Marielle has had dresses for months." "Oh, absolutely, us too," Lillian Talbot said, trying to rise with both grace and speed. Around them other phones lit up with the same excitement. The designer who promised the most beautiful gowns, usually delivered them, then disappeared, was back, and seeking a select few who would gain entrance, but only if they could find the shop. The Empire's rooftop restaurant swelled with the news that Unseelie Brothers Limited had been spotted near Lexington and 78th and then vanished. Women began to gather their purses. Chin up, with a casual glance at her watch, Vanessa rose from her chair. "There's always quite a cost associated with these things. We'll meet again next week. Dear Lillian, can you manage the check?" Trapped, Lillian nodded, chewing her lip as tables emptied, her fork tumbling noisily to the floor. She watched helplessly as Vanessa led the charge to pull children out of Saturday classes and locate the mythical atelier before anyone else. From the social season, Plate 6, the dress of mists, worn by Miss Eurydice Louise, née Mumford von Hiefenlager, future Duchess of Leidenspiel, to the Women's Junior League Winter Ball in 1879. Photo by Jeremy Avedon, possible ancestor of Richard Avedon. This event was notable for several reasons, including the young man who went missing, a rumor, and the number of proposals for that evening. Designer Beauregard von Unseelie. From The Social Season, Plate 22, the suit of swords, worn by Prince Reza IV of Persia to the Historical Museum Ball and Gala, before it was replaced by the Artisan's Fete and other titles in 1956. Photo courtesy of the former ambassador to blank. A shining entree into the rather staid men's fashions of the time, white tie, tails. The suit was made to be seen. The event was notable for the number of duels, 2, it produced, as well as 2 couples who were never heard from again, confirmed, assumed elopements. Designer, David D. Unseelie. Sarah Sebastian was too uninterested and too poor to worry about the season.
"We have new designs due next week, Ree, and our senior projects. We need to think about graduating. Focus,"
she reminded her best friend and cousin, Marielle. Ree, having recently endured a month of fittings at her mother's insistence, groaned and stared over her shoulder at the bulky coat she'd drawn atop a Fashion Institute-approved croquis.
"I think I hate fashion."
She held a bolt of sky-blue fabric as Sarah draped a mannequin in color. "I think this will work," Sarah murmured around a mouthful of pins as she arranged fabric and fondly ignored her cousin.
"You're the one with the talent. I wish I could have worn your gown,"
Ree began, as an elevator outside their studio dinged and Sarah chewed her lip.
"Focus. Yes."
The afternoon sun slanted perfectly through the windows across the beginnings of Sarah's latest design, as Mrs. Saunders navigated a forest of dress forms, stools, and workbenches. When she was close enough to touch her daughter's elbow, she shot a look at Sarah that forbade protest.
"Marielle, you must come," she urged. "Unseelie Brothers. The shop that made my gown has returned. You must find it before anyone else."
"Mother, I have plenty of dresses, and Sarah needs—" Ree began.
"Sarah understands, and will help us, won't you, sweetheart?"
Mrs. Saunders nodded at Sarah, who was already folding her work away, unwilling to fight with her aunt. Ree's mother paid for Sarah's art classes. She'd threatened more than once to stop if Sarah crossed her too much. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. Angry, yes, and curious. She'd heard so many stories about this shop. She and Ree had both seen its creations, including their mother's gowns in photographs, and discussed in fashion classes. She'd even gotten close enough to almost touch one once in Mrs. Saunders's walk-in closet as she and Ree were having an after-school snack while Ree's nanny dozed.
"Are you certain?"
She hesitated. "You'll go," her aunt said, with the same insistence as she'd used when Sarah's jam-sticky fingers had nearly touched those amazing chiffon flowers that seemed almost alive. The dress hung in its own display frame in the closet, lit from above and below, looking as perfect as it must have a decade before, when Mrs. Saunders wore it and a pair of elbow-length calfskin gloves to the winter charity ball. The gown of flowers had little competition that year, eclipsed only by Sarah's mother's own dress, the butterfly gown, which, that dress having disappeared long ago, Sarah couldn't touch at all, so she'd wanted to hold the next best thing. There had been a lot of shouting back then, an abrupt yank away and a stern talk with Sarah's father. No one crossed Mrs. Saunders or her closet. Now, Ree closed her sketchbook tightly on the croquis. She put her colored pencils in their case. Sarah gazed at the draped cloth she'd just begun to imagine as movement and light in human form, and did the same, feeling resigned. She took one small risk, hoping to free herself from this latest task.
"Don't you want to hunt for the shop yourself, Aunt Vanessa?"
At Sarah's question, the older woman paled. "They might not allow me back inside." She said it quickly, and Sarah wondered if she'd misheard, because a moment later her aunt pulled herself up to her full height and chuckled. "How silly. I'm a paying customer in good standing. We'll be fine. You locate the shop and you'll call me. I'll stop at the bank as they expect cash from those who can afford their fees. Go!" She herded the two young women out of studio. Once on the street, Ree glanced occasionally at the image of the door on her phone, while Sarah kept her eyes peeled. After only a few blocks, they caught sight of the Talbot twins, weaving their way down Madison Avenue. A cab ride later, they spotted Odell Rankinfall and her friend Elizabeth Dorchester in the West Village, peering into alleys and checking the map on their phones. They weren't the only ones on the hunt. Silently, Sarah wished them well. The girls turned left at 68th, near a shuttered chocolate shop, and veered almost too close to their favorite second-hand store. "No, not today." Sarah pulled Ree away from the window, knowing she would be in trouble, not Ree, if they didn't at least put on a good show of finding the store. They took the subway to 35th and walked the garment district until their feet ached, without finding the green sign. The sun was sinking into the fangs of the towers when Sarah muttered, "Oh, damn it," because there it was, just as Mrs. Saunders had, over numerous dinners and brunches, described how she'd come by her own spectacular gown for her debut season, how she'd captured the heart of her very own prince that night in the form of Mr. Saunders, and in no small part because of her perfect gown. She left out details, of course, including important ones concerning Sarah's mother. Sarah and Ree stood before the broad oak doors, wound with metal vines for hinges, set beside a narrowly arched, darkened window. Sarah remembered those details and shivered. It was all a little bit strange, the way the story changed each time her aunt told it, and to whom. How she and her sister Serena spent all they had on their gowns, the butterfly gown and the gown of flowers, or that they'd gotten them last minute at discount, or that they had been surprised with them by a well-off relative, and then how well they'd done at the ball, how lucky Mr. Saunders and Mr. Sebastian had been. Whatever the story, Sarah was quite certain that moments before the shop had not been on 38th Street, crammed between an established jeweler and a new shoe store. But there it was, green signs swinging above the window, and blank headless mannequins peering out at the street. Beyond the muslin models stretched velvet darkness, pricked by a few tiny lights, Sarah thought, but couldn't be sure. "It's closed," Ree sighed, similarly relieved. The green signs swung in the wind as she texted her mother the news. Her fingers had barely left the screen when the phone rang. Even Sarah could hear her aunt's joy over the speaker, demanding the address. "Don't do anything until I get there. Don't touch anything, and absolutely do not let it leave." The young women stared at each other, unsure of how to accomplish either order, much less both. A couple pushed past them on the sidewalk, eyes on one another. A woman with a double stroller gave them a wide berth, plowing towards some distant goal. Sarah's stomach growled, and she thought impatiently of her design project, due in 2 weeks, and still just a bolt of fabric. She wanted to get back to the studio, now that she'd done what Ree's mother had wanted. Still, she felt a moment of pride. Despite not having the right pedigree for the season, she'd found the shop that everyone who did was searching for. Her mother had worn one of these gowns, yes, but her mother was long gone, wasn't she? And the gown with her, only a few months after Sarah was born. When asked, Aunt Vanessa would purse her lips and shake her head, as if implying Sarah herself might have had something to do with that. She fled. Such disgrace, such a flighty girl, not suited for this world. To avoid her aunt's reprobation, Sarah resolved early not to be curious about the shop or the season, though sometimes she couldn't help it. The sign, the name, Unseelie Brothers, made Sarah wonder who was behind the doors. What magic could they work? What could she learn, given the opportunity? These gowns had brought everyone in her life together. Her aunt and Mr. Saunders, her mother and her father, but not quite in the same ways. Sam Sebastian had been working the event, not attending, when Serena and Vanessa had appeared at the ball. Serena had become Sarah's father's muse that very night, and despite everyone's cautions, they'd married even more quickly at the courthouse. Sarah, born 7 months after that, was, according to her aunt's taught words, a perfect scandal. But now that Sarah had found the store, perhaps her aunt would let up a little on the reprobation. Maybe, Sarah thought, I'll get a peek inside before getting the heck out of here. But the window was too dark, the door very much locked. At least the shop was staying put. Ree slumped against an oak panel, scrolling her phone. I don't want to do this season. Not without you, Sarah. I hate the balls and the stodgy people. I refuse to try on any more gowns. Your dress would have been so much better. Sarah, having less than no choice in that matter, kept quiet. She'd offered to design a gown for her cousin months ago. Ree had said a delighted yes. Then Mrs. Saunders found out, and then everyone pretended as if that had never happened. 20 minutes passed before a yellow cab screeched to a stop beside them. Ree's mother emerged, ensconced in a green Versace cape and pale gloves, gold and gems glittering among the layers, her makeup perfectly retouched to make her seem even more intimidating. How she'd had time to freshen up and go to the bank, both, baffled Sarah. Mrs. Saunders beamed at her daughter, paid the driver, and, once she'd pulled the rest of her cloak from the cab, stared at the door in disbelief, edged with something like fear. Sarah had never seen her aunt look afraid. It looks just the same. Mrs. Saunders reached a gloved hand towards the door. Quickly she recoiled and shook her fingers as if the handle had stung her. What now? What now? I need a pen. She looked left and right, then dug in her handbag as the Talbot twins rounded the corner at a run. Mum, Ree said, more due to the energy of the hunt and the fact that she'd found the twins awful and pushy than out of any desire to gain entrance to a closed shop. Sarah offered Mrs. Saunders a plastic Sharpie marker. Call 1-800-ART-SUPPLY. And her aunt scribbled a note on the glove, signed her name with a flourish, and stuffed it through the door's mail slot. They waited, feeling ridiculous, as the Talbot twins edged closer, texting. No one seemed more surprised than Mrs. Saunders when the lights came on inside the atelier immediately, and no one was more shocked than Sarah when she glimpsed her own long-gone mother's face in the shadows of the shop. Aunt Vanessa, look, Sarah whispered, before the doors swung open, then began to shut again. Quickly! Mrs. Saunders pushed them over the threshold. The doors slammed closed right in front of the Talbot twins, their chiseled GQ smiles tumbling into glares at the window. We've done it! Mrs. Saunders clapped her hands, one gloved, one ungloved, together. She peered into the darkness. Hello? She heard the rustle of wings. She realized she could not move. None of them were able to step beyond the row of mannequins any further into the shop. Mrs. Saunders tried, calling out in dismay. Ree was too entranced by the sparkling ceiling to notice. Did I really see my mother? Sarah started to doubt. The face had been young, her age, not sun-spotted like her aunt's. Probably just my own reflection. Then a gust of wind battered them, smelling like it came from deep within the earth. "Welcome!" A tall young man in a quilted jacket and chiffon skirt beamed at the trio, the curve of his lips a mere tolerance, though his eyes sparkled. His hair was a deep purple, and his fingers, when he clasped Sarah's hand, were long and pale. "What have we here?" He moved on to Ree, staring deep into her green eyes. "Ah, the season must be upon us, and this is New York. Am I right?" As if there were any question. As if Ree's mother wasn't already messaging her co-chairs to let them know she'd gained entrance first. When the young man approached her, Sarah and Ree were stunned to see Mrs. Saunders dip the deepest curtsy possible to him. "Sir, I paid for a gown from your shop long ago. I wish another for my daughter, whatever the cost." A smile broke across the man's face. "Vanessa, how nice to see you again. Please call me Beau, and gowns for both young ladies." "Both?" Sarah's aunt blinked confused. Then she said, "No, for my Marielle. The other's not mine." Sarah took a long survey of the shop's black and white walls, blinking once or twice, but she stayed quiet. She'd be able to leave her aunt's presence soon, having done her duty. She wondered if she might return and look around the shop again later. As if he could read her thoughts, the atelier's owner smiled even more sharply. "Then perhaps she is ours," he said under his breath. He turned back to Ree, not looking anywhere but her eyes. "You will do nicely." Ree bristled, and Sarah did as well, but Mrs. Saunders caught each girl by the arm, her fingers sharp on their sleeves, freezing them both. "Marielle will be delighted, sir." At the slightest twitch of the young man's hand, the three of them moved forward beyond the row of mannequins. Before them, a broad, velvet-curtained clearing took up the center of the shop, its circumference sparkling with mirrors. Several soft benches patterned in vines invited, but Sarah didn't dare sit down. Shop attendants' shadows played around the edges of things. One Sarah noticed had a mouth that glittered with pins. Beyond the mirrors, Sarah saw once more her mother's face, as young as she'd been in the only photograph Sarah's father had kept. As still as that photograph, in fact. Sarah was disappointed to discover more life-size images displayed around the showroom. Girls and boys, all Ree's and Sarah's ages, captured in black and white along the walls. Sarah's mother among them. Not real, then, nor her dress of butterflies. Ree whispered again, but this time her voice had a tinge of awe. "Look." She pulled Sarah towards a sparkling, strapless gown, slit up the side, a glittering beaded confection gracing the sheerest fabric Sarah had ever seen. She read the label, "The Ice Queen." "Absolutely not." Ree's mother steered them back to pictures of thousand-button silks and gently draped sleeves in the shop catalogue. Sarah tried not to get caught wrinkling her nose. The designs didn't seem groundbreaking at all. They looked a bit fussy, most of them, except the Ice Queen. That one practically danced by itself. "Mother," now Ree was not whispering, "we will conspire for something very special." Beau gestured at someone beyond the mirrors. Moments later, a dress was laid across his arms like a child. Behind him, two assistants carried shoes and necklaces. Mrs. Saunders looked at them hungrily. "We thought the young lady might be interested in something more." With a flourish, a muslin dress hung between the mirrors, and Ree's eyes went wide as a projector illuminated it with the design, a flock of white birds circling the waist and bust. "Oh," she whispered, entranced. The murmuration, Beau intoned. Perhaps, Mrs. Saunders said. Sarah, momentarily freed, as her cousin became lost in the attention, texted her father where they were. Would you like...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?